Hello, welcome to the Real Deal Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Art Veal. In the next half an hour, we will discuss some of the current topics facing residential real estate in and around our community. We will also give you some educational information to help you with your real estate needs, and we'll discuss the question of the week. So let's get started. First, a little background on me and why I'm hosting the show. I'm a columnist for two local papers in Illinois and Indiana. My column focuses on residential real estate, personal finance, and mortgage questions. I also am a columnist for the Yahoo real estate section as well as the Yahoo finance section. And my articles have been published in over 100 real estate and personal finance websites. I also own a company called We Buy Houses Home Services and have worked in the residential real estate field for over 15 years. But enough about me, let's get started. So, today's local topic that we'll be discussing is the President Obama plan for the HARP program. For those of you that aren't familiar with the HARP program, HARP stands for Homeowner Assistance Refinance Program. It's a program that the President and the government is rolling out that will allow homeowners that have a mortgage that's more than their house is worth right now to refinance their home, even though they owe more than the house is worth. The whole program is meant to help homeowners who can't refinance, even though rates are at historic lows. It's meant to help them refinance their home and get the mortgage down to a rate that's acceptable, that's lower, and at the same time to lower the principal amount on the mortgage to a rate that, to an amount that is more in line with today's market. I think this is a good program. It's a good start for the government. The government also said that the program would lower the cost to refinance. It would speed up the process to refinance because they would do a streamlined appraisal and a streamlined paperwork and a bunch of other things that are going to benefit the homeowner. So on the surface, this seems like a very good program, and it seems like definitely a step in the right direction to get the housing markets moving again. The biggest drawback on the program is that you have to be current on your mortgage. You can never have fallen behind on your mortgage. So it's not meant to help homeowners in distress. It's more so meant to help homeowners that just are kind of stuck in limbo. They can afford their house, but they want to take advantage of the lower interest rates, but at the same time they can't go into a bank and get a loan because they owe more than the house is worth. So I think this is a good program, and I think that the biggest catch-22 with the entire program is the fact that it's going to be hard for the government to justify lowering the principal amount on household A, where this person is paid every month and never had a problem. What's the incentive for household B, the person that wasn't looking at the HARP program, to continue to pay their mortgage payment and not refinance their home? This in turn kind of seems like everyone in America, or almost everyone in America, who has gotten a mortgage in the last 10 or 15 years is going to want to refinance. Who wouldn't want a lower interest rate, your principal amount of your house lowered to a low level? And who wouldn't want those kind of things? It almost seems like it's refinancing the entire country, or at least the majority of the country. So, but I do think that it will help in one key point. There are a lot of people that are doing what's called systematic defaults, where they understand that they owe more than the house is worth. They can afford the house, but because the house is worth so little, they choose to walk away, even though they didn't have to walk away. And this would stop a lot of those people from just walking away, and that would kind of help in a roundabout way. That would kind of help slow down the foreclosure rate in the country. So I think that is a good first step. The next hot topic or topic that I wanted to discuss today was the senator group, the group of senators that got together and they're trying to force Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to create an REO rental program. This could be a game changer in the government programs as far as how to work with housing. What these senators are essentially asking the government to do is they're saying that because most homes that are foreclosed on are ended up back in the hands of the government, not the bank, but the government. Because the government, which did FHA housing or federal housing assistance, where they assisted the bank or guaranteed the loan that was, they guarantee the loan on the house when someone gets a loan. That's how most people, probably 80% of the people in America, got a home loan through a FHA loan. Well, when they get those loans and they default, then the government eventually takes the house back and pays the bank a good portion of the money that they would have lost by, going through a full foreclosure. So the government has a huge surplus of properties. So what they're trying to do is they're saying, instead of us trying to sell these properties when the banks won't give loans, we can't give a loan to everybody that needs a loan, and we've got a surplus that is growing every month. Every month that surplus is getting larger. Even with the couple of properties they do sell every month, that surplus is still growing larger and larger every month. So what they're saying is, what we're going to do is we're going to rent out those houses to people that qualify for a rental, and then they can turn around and take those same houses and keep them on a rental with getting an income. The people will maintain the house and different things like that. It would be a really strong program to fill these houses. And let's look at the positives of this. One, the government would make money from the rental of these houses because they're holding these properties now and they're literally just hemorrhaging money while they pay the taxes, the insurance, the lawn care, everything they have to do. They're paying money to do those things as a government on, however millions of houses they have. At the same time, this would allow the community to benefit because the community could then collect the taxes from those houses, and the money would be coming from the tenant that would spend money in the community, and that would spur business and economic growth in that same community. And as many of you know, communities around the country are struggling right now to make payments to pay for services. So they're looking at cutting costs. This would be a way to bring people back into a community. The third benefit is less maintenance for the government. The government wouldn't have to deal with busted pipes and everything that goes with being a landlord. The government is not a landlord. They would be able to do things that a government should do as opposed to trying to be a landlord for all these properties that they're taking and don't know what to do with. I actually had a similar program that I thought would be a good program for the government, and I thought the government should rent to own those houses. The government is the biggest bank that we have right now. Why can't the government rent those houses out, and then if the person makes their payments every month on time for a set amount of time, and then they look at their credit history and see what they're doing with their credit and tell them to fix these things, once they fix those things, why can't the government give them a loan on that same house that they rented to them? This would fundamentally change how the government and how houses are bought and sold in America. I don't know if the government has some red tape or something like that that prohibits them from doing something like that, but they're the government. They can change the laws if they need to facilitate helping people get into houses and at the same time increasing the communities with putting working class people in homes. So I think this is a great program. I don't know how far it's going to go. I don't know if it's just a suggestion from the 33 senators, but it's a start. And the conversation needs to be had in this country, and I think that's a start. So now I want to discuss our educational point for today. Our educational point is, how can you sell your house if you don't have equity and you can't get a realtor to list your house? It's a common problem with families in this economy, in this market, that they can't sell their home for a couple of reasons. They don't have equity in the home because they owe more than the house is worth. At the same time, they can't get a realtor to even list their home because the realtor is concerned that they won't get paid or that they won't make an adequate amount of income from their property because they have no equity. So when you're in this situation, you're faced with a couple of options. And I wanted to go over some of the options that I think people should look at. And at the same time, I'll discuss some of the options that most people are familiar with. Well, the first option that people are familiar with when you're in a house that has no equity is they look at a short sale. For those of you that aren't familiar, a short sale is when you sell the house, you basically go to the bank and say, bank, I can't sell my house for what I owe on it because it's not worth that much. So even if I were to find a buyer, let's say I owe $150,000 on my house and my house is only worth $100,000 in this market. That's a very common problem. Well, what would happen is, even if you were to find a buyer that says they want to buy the house at $150,000, when they go to get their bank loan, the bank is going to pull an appraisal. When they do the appraisal, they're going to say, well, this house is only worth $100,000. So what they'll do is they'll say either we can't finance it, or they'll say we'll finance $100,000 of it, but then you, Mr. Buyer, have to come up with the $50,000 additional money. And we want you to realize, Mr. Buyer, that that $50,000 is over and above what the house is worth. Now, most buyers are not going to do that. They either don't have the $50,000, they don't want to give up $50,000 even if they do have it, and they're not going to pay more than what a property is worth. So, in essence, what you do with a short sale is you go to the bank and say, look, it's not worth $150,000, which is what I owe you. It's worth $100,000. How about I find a buyer at $100,000, and when they agree to buy it, you all agree to forgive or to take the $100,000 as a payoff on the debt of $150,000. The bank, a lot of times the bank will agree to something like this because they know that even if they take the house from you in foreclosure, they're still only going to get $100,000 for it because it's only worth $100,000. So why fight over $50,000 that's not even there anymore? It's much more realistic for the bank to say, we'll take the $100,000 and basically forgive the $50,000 that you owe to us. That's the simplest form of how I can explain that, because it never, or at least in my situations that I've seen, I've never seen it go that smoothly. More than likely what happens is you go to the bank and tell them that you'd like to sell the house for less. They tell you to fill out a bunch of paperwork and they will get back to you and let you know. Then in the meantime, they tell you to list the house and try to sell it. You hire a realtor, you go through trying to sell the house, you find a buyer. The buyer wants the house at a lower price. You call the bank excited saying, I've got a buyer that's going to buy my $150,000 house for $100,000. Will you approve it? And the bank says, we'll think about it. And they go through a process of deciding if they want to do it, and this might take months. They usually should do it in a couple of days. I've never seen it take a couple of days. It always takes months and months and months. Meanwhile, you're on edge because you want to know if they're going to accept it. The buyer's on edge because they want to buy the house or whatever they're going to do and different things like that. And what ends up happening in a lot of cases, the seller ends up not being able to sell the house because the bank doesn't give them an answer fast enough, and the buyer gets discouraged and they go find another property. After all, they've got financing and they can spend it anywhere they want. So they'll just go find another house that they can find and fall in love with, and you're stuck with your house. So short sales are one way to go when selling a house with no equity, but it's not always the best. Another way that I've found that is pretty successful is to offer owner financing. Owner financing is when you basically agree to become the bank, in essence, to your buyer. So in other words, you tell your buyer, I am going to finance you, and you'll pay payments to me or to my bank directly, however you work it out. And once you pay those payments for X amount of time, or whenever you refinance, then you'll pay off what's left on the house. I like that much better because, one, it's faster. You can almost always find someone who wants to get a house through owner financing. It's not very hard. Two, with owner financing, there's a much larger market for people that are looking at owner finance properties, even if they don't know it. They might not know that they want to own a finance property, but when they see your terms or whatever you're asking, they are much more willing to go the route of owner financing as opposed to bank financing. Three, you get a higher price for owner financing. In some cases, you can even get a price for over what the house is worth, because people are paying a premium for not only the house, but for the financing that you're putting in place. They otherwise could not get financing. And four, you don't take as much, if any, hit on your credit when you do an owner finance deal. Um, because of the fact that your financing that you have stays in place, this person is covering your financing, but at the same time, they're paying down how much is owed on the house over time. And whenever they're ready to buy, let's say after 5 or 7 or 8 years they're ready to buy, then you can always go back to your bank and renegotiate. And even if it takes several months for the bank to agree to a short sale, this person is already in the house and already making payments to the bank. So the bank is much more likely to say, we can work with that, we can work with that person, as opposed to a buyer who's not in the house, who just made a formal short sale offer, and they turn around and say, well, you're taking too long, I'm going to go look for another house. This person's already in the house. They can wait the couple of months it takes to get an answer because they're in the house. So the main drawback with owner financing is the fact that you don't get completely absolved of the property or the debt. You still are officially the owner of the property, you still officially owe the debt, and you're still tied to the property. Now, you're not going to be, if you set it up right, you're not going to be making repairs on the property and everything else. But at the same time, it can be intimidating for someone who is not really comfortable doing it, even though there's nothing to be intimidated about. If this is something you want to consider, I would suggest you contact your local attorney and get an attorney that is comfortable with real estate, that has either done in the past, has completed a owner finance transaction, or is willing to go out and educate themselves about owner finance transactions. Don't assume all attorneys are of equal knowledge. Some attorneys know more about a specific topic than others. So find an attorney that knows information about what you're trying to do. So that's my take on selling a house with no equity. The final step that you can do, which a lot of people do, I'm not really a big fan of, you can sell the house as a straight rental. In other words, rent the house out. A lot of people do that, and it's not really a sale. You're renting the house out, and yes, you do protect the property. You do protect your credit because the person's paying the mortgage on the property every month, and you do protect the house because you put somebody in there. It's not just sitting empty. But the negative is that you are a landlord at this point, and if you did not plan on becoming a landlord, then it is not a glamorous life. Believe me, I know from experience. It takes a special breed to become a landlord and to thrive at being a landlord. So it's really something to consider if you just decide to rent the house out. A lot of people look at that as the easiest scenario, but believe me, you get up a couple of times at 3 in the morning and have to go fix a leaky toilet or something like that, you will quickly decide that it might not be the right option for you. But those are 3 options for you to consider. Whichever way you decide to go is up to you. So hopefully that helps you and gives you some insight on how to sell your home with no equity. Now for this week's question of the week. This week's question of the week comes from Miss Sains of Chicago, Illinois. And Miss Sains asks, Dear Art, I am concerned about how I should hold title to my property. Me and my husband are nearing retirement and we want to give our property to our children when we pass. I have gotten several responses about how to hold title to our property and was wondering if you could give any input. I would appreciate it. Thank you. Well, Ms. Sains, there's a couple of things to look at. The first thing I would do is consider talking to a financial planner. The reason I say that is because without knowing your full financial workup or situation, it's hard for me to give you any advice as far as how to hold title. What I would suggest is I hardly ever suggest that anyone hold title in their own name. I personally like to hold title in land trust. There's a couple of reasons why. Land trust, for those of you that don't know, land trusts are kind of like a checking account where the title of the property is held in the checking account and you control the checking account. So you don't officially own the property in your name, but you control the account that owns the property. So, i.e., you do control the property or own the property. The reason I like land trust is because land trust, first of all, give you a veil of privacy because they don't have your name on all the legal documents as far as who owns the property. Two, the other benefit of a land trust is that it can protect you from creditors, which is always a good thing. It can't guarantee and block creditors. Land trusts are not set up for that kind of thing, but it can protect you from frivolous lawsuits and creditors that are going after you for something that's just want to attach to your name and different things like that. So it can protect you against some aspects of creditors. Like I said, it's not meant to protect you from getting out of debts or anything like that. That's not the makeup of a land trust. And finally, the last benefit of a land trust is that it allows you to transfer property a lot easier. If you and your husband, for example, had your property in a land trust and made your children beneficiaries of that land trust, if anything were to happen to you and your husband, then the trust automatically transfers over to your children. You don't have to go through probate. And if you've ever been through, or anyone who's ever been through probate with a loved one, knows that it can be a costly and time-consuming process. And if you want to get your assets in order now, it would cost you much less and cost your family members much less headache if you were to go ahead and set it up so that the trust automatically went to them in the event that you passed. So it would save some time and money on that in that aspect. So I would consider looking at a land trust. I don't like holding title in your own name personally. I just don't see a benefit to it. But again, like I said, talk to a financial advisor and see if that's something that makes sense for your situation. Okay? Thanks. So that about does it for this week's edition of the Real Deal Real Estate Show. Again, I'm your host, Art Veal. This is our first show, so if you have questions or comments, or you'd like to give me a topic to discuss, or you have a specific question, you can email me. My email address is below at art@webuyhouses2.net. Again, that's art, A-R-T, at webuyhouses2.net. You can email your questions there or comments. I'll read all comments and respond to any comments that I can. You can also call us if you have a question or a comment that you like. Our number is 312-698-8851. Again, that's 312-698-8851. You can leave show topics or things you'd like us to discuss, and I'll be happy to discuss it and get back to you. Even if I don't know about it, I will research it and find out as much as I can and talk about it on the show. So look forward to seeing you all next week. Tell your friends and family to watch the show. There's a very handsome host, and hopefully they'll watch the show and find it interesting, and we can help some people along the way. Thank you, and good night.